Hello, dear audience of the Riga International Film Festival. I'm glad seeing you in this mediated virtual format, and I'm very pleased for this upcoming conversation with the director of film Aalto, Virpi Suutari, who is here, here in this moment. Hi, Virpi.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thanks for showing the Aalto film at the Riga International Film Festival.
And thank you very much for this really wonderful, I would say, poem of relationship that are being translated into design and architecture and the social milieus as well. But just to start with, I was curious to ask, because I've been reading a lot about the Aalto couple, Alvar and Aino, and Elisa, of course. And I wanted to know your personal connection, how you entered to this milieu and the realm of Aalto.
Well, I actually entered the Aalto's world already in the 70s in my hometown, which is by the Artek circle. It's sort of the capital of Lapland here in Finland. And there were quite many Aalto buildings over there. And one of them was specifically important for me when I was a child, and that was the Aalto Library, where I went very often after the school days. And I already as a child realized that the building was really special, and the architecture had something more to it than the most of the buildings where I went. So I think I already started to dream about this film when I was a child, even though I didn't know it then. And now that I'm over 50, I felt that I'm old enough to make a film about iconic characters like the Aaltos are. But you know, the Aalto architecture and Aalto design is really part of our national everyday life, because we see Aalto buildings in most of the cities in Finland. Most of the Finns have some Aalto design objects at home, like the Aalto vases or the glassware or the stools. So the Aaltos are part of our everyday life, really. But as such, I think we surprisingly, we know quite little actually about where the Aaltos actually as human beings, and what was the architectural thinking behind these buildings and design objects.
Sure, I think that you have managed to decipher this personal level as well, but I wanted to ask, so as you amplify that the Aalto idea or the brand Artek is also embedded in your national identity, whether this was an obstacle for you to approach or how it kind of conveyed its appearances to you?
Yeah, it is sort of an obstacle as well, and you can guess that when you pronounce that you will make a film about this sort of iconic figure, that you get a lot of advices how to make the film, and that's why I said that I was mature enough to make the film, because I've been doing documentary films over 30 years now, and I have quite a lot of experience. I have not made a film about architect or architecture per se before this film, but I've always been interested in the space and the stages in the film. It has always been very important for me to study how human beings are interacting with the space. So it was really the right moment for me to make the film. And I, of course, realized that I have to make the research for this film very, very carefully, because I can't be, making any mistakes about the facts. So since I'm not an architect, I really had to study a lot. And I also created a web of people around the world that I interviewed many times, and made a lot of research, archive research, and I connected many different foundations, and it was a lot of work. But besides that research, I had to keep in mind that I want to make my film about the Aaltos. And it was very important for me to reflect my own feelings, those feelings that I already had as a child in the Aalto buildings, to reflect that core feeling in this film. And also to reflect the ideology that the Aaltos had in their architecture, which was to always to consider the little human being, as they said, to be in the center in their thinking. And it was very important to try to reflect also the atmosphere in their buildings in the film, and which wasn't that easy task. As actually, it's not easy to make a film about buildings, because how to get that atmosphere to the film. So that was something that we really had to work a lot with the editor and with the sound design and so on.
I agree. There was a wonderful saying from a good friend of mine, and he has defined the architecture that it's not about the walls, but it's what is happening between those walls. So this is the main idea. I would say that your scope or your perspective in this film of Aalto's legacy and their personal relations is embedded in this. But just to have a small recap, for those who aren't aware, you made a wonderful documentary, Garden Lovers, which came out in 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And there you already had, I would say, the very nuanced sensibility of people who are, let's say, have this passion for gardening or the surroundings. And here you also conveyed, I would say, this very pointile and nuanced direction. Just to recap and just to start with the conception, what was the starting point for making this film, whether it was the personal kind of dimension, correspondence between Alvar and Aino, or was it this kind of conceptualized idea of Artek or buildings, or what was it for you personally? Just to start.
Well, I've always been interested in people, in human beings and the human behavior. So I guess that was my starting point to try to find out who was Alvar Aalto actually, who was Aino Aalto and the second wife Elisa Aalto, who were there and what were the dynamics between them. And I soon discovered that, to my I wasn't aware how symbiotically actually Alvar and Aino created the basis for the Aalto grammar, for the Aalto form language together. So that was a discovery for me, and I think for most of the Finnish public too, that we haven't been aware of how symbiotically, how closely, how equally they work together in the beginning. So that was something that really started to interest me. But of course, the whole starting point was from my own experience. So I had that in mind all the time. But then when I started to do the research for the film, I got a bit worried in the beginning because I didn't still have the letters between Aino and Alvar. And since Aino died already in 1949, there isn't that much archive material about her. So I was really worried that who was she? How can I get to know her better? And also how they were interacting and working together, and how was their marriage, their more intimate life like, and so on. But then luckily I got in touch with the Aalto family, and I got the permission to read and to use the love letters they wrote to each other. And I mean, there were hundreds of those letters, even though I have used only few of them, few very hand-picked, very carefully selected letters to the final film. But that was really the moment when I started to believe in this whole project, because since I'm not an architect, I didn't want to make only an academic, cool film about architecture. There are those films on the market as well, but I wanted to try to combine the professional world of the Aaltos to the more intimate, more personal level, and to make these two different levels in dialogue in the film. Because I think what is essential about their architectural thinking is really, it's about the human beings, what a human being needs from architecture. We need very simple things like light, light and warmth and shelter and so on, and beauty in our everyday life. And the Aaltos were all about that. And that was something that I tried to get to the film as well. So he was not a theoretist. He wasn't talking about architecture in a theoretical way. So I think in that sense too, it was important that the film is not too theoretical. But yeah, I wanted to find the contradictory contradictory human beings, as we all are, from this iconic picture. I wanted to dig inside and see what I will find.
As I was preparing for our conversation, I found that you've been quite often used this term forest wisdom when describing this ideology. Maybe you could tell a little bit more to the audience.
I mean, the term forest
wisdom.
Yeah, forest wisdom. Yeah, they were really architects who understood what the Finnish landscape is about. They understood the landscape. They understood, as I said, about the light, water movements, things like that. They were really aware of the surroundings where the building was supposed to be. It has been said that they are really like, they had a forest wisdom in their architecture, and sometimes they even brought the forest inside the building. Like there is this fantastic private house, Villa Mairea, where it seems like the forest has been brought inside the house in an architectural form. So it's there concretely, but I think it's more in their ideology, how they were aware of the nature and the interaction between the building and the surroundings and so on, and the light levels and everything. So they were really, really aware of those essential elements. And they were also very aware of using the ideas from the vernacular architecture and the ideas from the past. So they beautifully combined the elements from the past and the vernacular to the modern architecture. And of course, Aalto's architecture has been described organic. That's one of the key words when you think about the Aaltos. The form language is very organic. They created their own way of modernism, really, because they didn't want to think about modern architecture as a very geometric, strict, only glass and concrete and stuff like that. But they used a lot of wood also and these natural shapes, which were also influenced by the avant-gardist art a lot. It's not right to say that those forms come only from the Finnish lakes and forests. They also come from the avant-garde art, and they got a lot of inspiration from that as well. But we also were thinking about this word organic when we were creating the film, that we tried to make it as organic as possible. And it's not so easy, of course, when your protagonists are no longer here and the other protagonists are buildings and design objects, how to make the film alive, how to make it breathe, how to make it organic. So as I said, yeah, we really had to deal with these things in the editing room and in the sound design. And I must say that they really did a wonderful job, these guys who were editing and doing the soundscape. We, for example, didn't want to create soundscape that would be too periodic, that when you make a historical film, you very often try to color a certain historical period. But we didn't want to do that, not in the music or in the soundscape. We tried to make it more timeless. I think that is also one of the keywords in Aalto architecture. One is organic, one is timelessness. It had to be timeless, not connected to a certain time period.
I agree what you said in terms of non-illustrativeness of the epoch or the time itself. But I was curious to ask about your personal insights when you read the correspondence or any personal belongings or archives of Alvar and Aino about their partnership and about the dynamics. So there are a lot of things that are in between, like gender, class, social struggles, and numerous others. Maybe you could maybe tell about your discoveries, or maybe this something with the general preconception of them both, something misunderstood, or there are some kind of nuances you would like to share.
Well, if you think professionally, I mean, they were writing to each other, especially when Alvar Aalto was working at MIT in United States for several periods. They were writing to each other about the professional things, and which is striking is that we are talking about 30s and 40s, and they were really equal in that sense, and that is something that we hadn't realized here in Finland, how equally they work together. And also Alvar Aalto, as a man, as a male, he really gave the appreciation for Aino Aalto's input. So he wasn't trying to hide her role, the professional role. So they're very equal in that sense. But then if you think about the more intimate relationship, which they also wrote a lot about, they wrote beautiful love letters to each other, with lots of humor also in the letters. But you become a bit sad when you read a lot of those, because they had big differences in their characters. Alvar Aalto was quite self-centered personality. He wanted everyone to fall in love with him, and he was flirting around everywhere, anywhere he went. And he really wanted to have that attention and appreciations by everyone. And Aino Aalto was much more quiet, very intelligent woman, but she didn't want to draw attention to her. So they were really different kind of personalities. And I think in the beginning of the marriage, they really enjoyed those differences, but when time went on, they had big problems also in their marriage, and Aino Aalto was suffering a lot from this difference. And she was actually, when she was suffering, she didn't blame Alvar, but she blamed herself, that I should be a bigger person. I should try to think more largely about things, more widely, as you do, Alvar. So I think that turned out to be a bit sad in the end. And Aino Aalto died, she was only 54 years old, and I think then Alvar was really, he was devastated, and he was also rightly so blaming himself about how he had behaved and so on. But it's interesting to read those letters also when you think about the times when they were written from the 20s on. you know, in the 20s, it was after the big wars, and and those intelligent people, they really wanted to be modern persons. They were interested in technology, and they wanted to find out about all the new things in the world, and get to know the key people in Europe and so on. So when they, for example, write about their sexuality, I think, and about some sexual adventures and so on, I think it reflects the time period also. Of course, it's their personal thing, but I chose some of those letters also to the film because it reflects the more general atmosphere among the intelligentsia. And they definitely wanted to be modern people in every sense of the word, also physically and so on.
Yeah, I agree about the zeitgeist, that it kind of accumulates in the writings, sure. And the architecture, what you said about the influence of avant-garde and modernism, aesthetics in general. But I was curious to ask, what you said previously, that when you started to make a film, there was very little archive, or it was non-existent to Aino. And why is it so? So we're still talking about this, I don't know, social acceptance. We're more likely to accept male figure rather than duet or duo or female figure in this environment, or why is it so?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. And I must say that there were few researches about Aino Aalto done a few years ago, some books. So there has been some research, fortunately, done already about Aino before the film, but I'm talking more generally that people haven't been aware of her importance. And I mean, she was the CEO and the artistic director of Artek company, for example, which is amazing in those years. But why we have forgotten her role? Yeah, it's definitely, it has to do with our general culture, that we have had the tendency to want to see these lonely male heroes who have done it all by themselves. And of course, no one is a genius alone. You always need a lot of people to help you. All the genius people also need other people. And so I think it's not so much the fault of Alvar Aalto, because as I said, I think in their time, Aino Aalto got a lot of attention. She got actually a lot of recognition and attention she wanted. And there were news articles about her and so on. So I don't think it was Alvar who tried to diminish her role. But perhaps it has something to do with the fact that she died already in 1949. And Alvar Aalto was very devastated. And I have heard from the family that he didn't really want to talk about her afterwards a lot. It was too difficult for him. So it might have something to do with that as well. But I think it's more of a problem of the general culture, that how we have seen history. But fortunately, that is changing. But you know, it's funny, there was a fiction book just published in Finland a few weeks ago about Aino Aalto. And it's of course a fiction book, but that book provokingly states that Alvar Aalto stole all the best ideas from Aino Aalto. So of course the book is fiction book and it wants to provoke. But I don't agree that this statement is right. Of course, it's very, very trendy to say nowadays that all the males were bad and the females were good and we should bring them to the light. And we definitely should bring Aino Aalto to the light. But it's not right to say that Alvar was trying to, diminish her role, because according to my own little research, I didn't find any proof of that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I would say just from watching your film, and of course having partially being embedded in the realm of Aalto's, I would say this is a combination. This is the collaboration where you cannot separate your personal life, your personal beingness from what you're creating and with other people. So it's a very fragile process, I would say. But I agree.
It definitely is, and I'm sure Alvar stole things from Aino, and Aino stole ideas from Alvar. And I mean, they were collaborating very symbiotically. And as some researchers stated to me, that it's not relevant to think, you know, who did what, because we know they were creating the basis for their own kind of modern language together. So it's not relevant to say that exactly who did what, who drew what line, because it's the same as in film business. I'm here as representing the Aalto film, but behind me are huge army of very talented professionals who have worked with me to make this film come true. And it's the same thing in the architectural offices. I mean, of course, it's always the head of the architectural office that we know. But if we talk about the architecture of Frank Gehry, I'm sure there have been lots of other architects who've been drawing Frank Gehry's work and so on. So of course it's very natural. This is how it is.
Yes, yeah, I agree, Virpi. But unfortunately, our time is over. Thank you very much for your time and sharing insights about your wonderful film. And actually, you caught me at interest. Looking forward whether the book that you referred to will be published in Latvian. Who knows? But
yes, and I must
to read, not only for architects community, but in general.
Yes, and there is also, besides this fictional book, there is a book published about the letters, which might be really interested in many people, and the Phaidon is publishing it abroad, so it will be available for larger audiences, and there are like hundreds of those letters, and also letters like what Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, one of the teachers at the Bauhaus School, wrote to Aino Aalto, for example. So that's a wonderful continuation if one gets interested in those letters and the context where the letters were written.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much, Virpi.
Thank you so much. And have a great festival.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.